Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of What If Naruto was sent to the past by the Shinigami. If you guys enjoy this What If, and want to see part 3 of it, comment down below, and let me know. The like goal for this video is 250 likes. So like this video, to let me know that you're interested in this series, and you want the next part. And go ahead and check out other What Ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Everything will be fine, everything will be fine, everything will be fine. Naruto chanted the words like a mantra in his head as he drew nearer and nearer to the Hokage's office, Anbu on a guard in tow. More like an escort. The old man probably didn't want him bolting the first chance he got. Naruto didn't blame them. After all, he had shown up with little to no warning, rescued their Jinchuriki, brought her back to the village, and then marched right in their front door. It certainly didn't help that he was dressed like a leaf shinobi. Kami, he was going to have fun explaining that one. Even more so his newfound appearance. On one hand, he could simply have them bring in a Yamanaka Zenoichi around at this point, to examine his mind and memories. On the other hand, Naruto wasn't all that certain he wanted to reveal whether he was from the future just yet. Already his presence here had far-reaching complications. He was painfully aware just how incredibly he might have fucked things up between his parents by rescuing Kushina before Minato had a chance to intervene. But that was why he was here, wasn't it? To change things, prevent the future from ever coming to pass. Not if you erase yourself from existence in the process, Bakihiro. His common sense smacked him upside the head. Naruto cringed at the thought. Although it also made him wonder. What would have happened if his mother and father never got together to begin with? Well, he wouldn't exist, for starters. And if he never existed, then Obito never attacked the leaf. And if Obito never attacked the leaf arc. Major headache. Naruto frowned, his pace slowing almost imperceptibly as he mulled the matter over. His guards didn't like that. Not one bit. Keep moving, outsider. One of the Anbu elbowed him in the back, forcing him to keep up. Naruto bit back a growl, and valiantly fought the urge to Rasengan the man and the rest of his squad into a nearby wall. Oh, and it would have been so easy, too. But if he pulled a stunt like that now, he was liable to get himself thrown out of the village, before he even had a chance to explain why he was here. And just how am I going to explain that, anyway? He wondered. He did his best as they drew close, mentally preparing himself for what lay on the other side. No fainting. Check. No spazzing out. Check. Cold sweat. Check. Just as he was about to set foot into the office and prepare himself for the lie of a lifetime and possibly the most epic fail in existence, a cold hand settled upon his shoulder. Hold, mortal. The Uchiha nearly jumped out of his skin. Because there, hovering before him in the black, was a face he'd hoped to never, ever see again. The Shinigami. Naruto opened his mouth to voice a reply, only to realize the guards around him had ceased moving. Everything had ceased. Time itself had stopped, the colors of the world having faded to a grim black and white. They were alone, frozen here in this moment of time. Thousands of thoughts ricocheted in his mind, countless words sought to leave his lips, as those dread eyes peered out at him from within the cover grin. In the end he settled for one. You? The Reaper inclined his head minutely. Well met, my emissary. That brought Naruto up short. Wait, what? He frowned, not just at his newfound title. You still remember me? His reply was met with a frown and a snort. I am the god of death, boy. Did you not think I would leave you unsupervised, when the fate of the entire world is at stake? Well, kinda. Snorting, the Shinigami shook his head, even then those eerie eyes never left his, not even for a minute. I thought I ought to inform you of something before you continue on your quest. And before I speak, I should caution you, do not panic. It paused for a moment, and when it finally spoke, its response was stern, almost stoic in its reply. The you as you know yourself has already ceased to exist. There was a silence. When Naruto didn't vanish from existence, a low growl left his lips. You wanna run that by me again, buddy? Silence. The Reaper reprimanded, its tone strident. By altering your DNA, you no longer exist as Uzumaki Naruto. Rather, you are an Uchiha. You already know this. What you do not know is thus, all traces of your former self were eradicated the moment I first laid my power upon you in limbo. Naruto blanched. He didn't like where this conversation was going. Please tell me that doesn't mean what I think it means. Shinigami nodded. The old you may yet still be born in this timeline, but any effect his existence might have had upon you has been nullified, my emissary. At Naruto's continued silence, the grim sighed. Perhaps I am over-explaining. Allow me to simplify. Say something foul were to befall Uzumaki Kushina, that she were to die, say, at the hands of an enemy shinobi. Were that to happen, even were your mother to perish, and those last traces of your old self eradicated, the you as you now know yourself would still continue on. To exist. You understand. He could feel a headache coming on, but the Uzumaki turned Uchiha nodded anyway. Just what the hell did you do to me? Naruto hissed. Not just my face, not just my DNA, but even my destiny. I barely recognize myself anymore. I made a wager against fate. I believe you mortals call it a gamble. The Reaper chortled then. It was a deep throaty sound. You truly are a unique existence. Your mind and your memories belong to you still, but should another try to pry into those memories, and I suspect the fools of this year soon will, they will see what the you of this time has seen, false memories indistinguishable from a true experience, bequeathed to that body you now possess. You may wish to thank me for this gift, but know this. Those golden eyes seemed to brighten at that moment, glowing with eerie intent as the death god loomed closer, its breath cold as ice upon his face. You must keep who you truly are, a secret. I shudder to think what might happen if the timeline comes unraveled any more than it already has. Are you sure I can't just kill myself and be done with it? The blonde growled, placing a hand to his now throbbing temple. It's beginning to sound a hell of a lot more simple. You will not. The Shinigami's voice was like a thunderclap in his ears. I have not bargained my very being on this gamble, only to have you end your life a second time. Alright, Naruto sighed. Loosen up and take it jovially, Reaper. I do not loosen up in my business, it replied. Now, you are going to be questioned. Interrogated. No, really. His deadpan was airily concealed. Silence. Shinigami snapped back. Now, listen well. This is what you are going to say. Naruto gulped as the Shinigami finished its explanation. That had to be the most fucked up lie ever. You do realize I'm flying by the seat of my pants here, right? I am well aware. The Reaper retorted as the colors of the world began to return, the flow of time moving inexorably ever onward. And I trust you to succeed. Before he could reply, the Shinigami was gone, leaving him alone with his escort. Thankfully, neither seemed to have noticed the little time lapse. One of them shoved him towards the doors a tad too roughly, snickering as the blonde stumbled toward the office. He did his best to push all thoughts of revenge from his mind, refusing to show weakness in the face of these fools. Here goes nothing. Naruto tapped softly on the door with his fist and announced his presence. Come in. Tears nearly sprang to his eyes. Upon entering, he found himself staring at a pair of familiar faces, lacking the liver spots of old age as well as stark gray hair, and another which he immediately recognized and gravitated towards. He would have recognized her anyway even without the June attire and his shade. Even so, he knew those yes, that hair, that bust. Just about anywhere. Even so, his jaw nearly dropped to the floor. Ah-chan. What did you just call me, punk? The young woman, she couldn't be more than 20, maybe 25, bristled angrily at his remark. Naruto had just enough time to register the remark before she cannoned forward, fingers clenched into a fist. Less than a day ago, that punch would have hit him. Now, his Uchiha blood sang at the sight of her attack, at the sound of battle. She seemed to slow in his peripheral vision, as though she were moving underwater. He wasn't quite sure when he moved or how, for that matter, only that he did, drifting forwards, even as the door shattered to timbers behind his back. Kami, but she was so slow. Or was he simply faster now? Boy. Whatever the case, she proved no match for him. His fingers locked around her wrist in a vice and gave a sharp twist, breaking the bone like a twig. Snick. She gasped in pained surprise, but Naruto was still moving, sweeping her legs out from beneath, forcing her to the floor with a strength he didn't know he had. Even as she tried to struggle, his fingers found her throat. Tsunade froze, eyes bulging. Because this was Tsunade, younger than he remembered her. This was the past after all, but still the future 5th Hokage nonetheless. And he'd just beaten her in unarmed combat. It all happened so swiftly. Realizing his mistake, he swiftly jerked backwards, leaving a baffled Tsunade gawping up at him. My apologies. I tend to react like that when someone attacks me. Sorry about calling you that too, he continued, at the murderous glint in her gaze. Must have mistook you for someone else. He held out a hand for he, and slowly, wearily, she accepted it. I certainly hope so, Tsunade said with eerie calm as she pressed a hand to her broken wrist, livid honey eyes bored into her future successor. Because whoever you are, if you ever say that to me again. No. Naruto waved his hands rapidly and performed a perfunctory bow. It was a mistake. My bad. If you're quite done haranguing him, Tsunade, Sarutobi's gravely voice interjected, I'd like to speak with our guest. Alone. But sensei. Dismiss. Tsunade looked as though she might say something else, might protest for a final time, but in the end, she resigned herself to a silent retreat, tending to her battered arm as she departed. Naruto turned to regard the Hokage as his fellow blonde gave them their silence. He was acting rather strange. Funny, he didn't remember the old man being quite this stern back in the day. The thought brought a frown to his lips. Had he made yet another mistake already? You're Sarutobi Hiruzen, right? You would be correct. The Sandaime replied, steepling his fingers together. The problem remains, however, that I do not know who you are. Let us begin with what we do know, then. His aging face seemed to tense as Naruto looked on, his old eyes turning harsh and stern. First, you retrieved Uzumaki Kushina from enemy forces at great peril to yourself, and returned her to this village, safe and sound. For this, you have my most sincere gratitude. Second, for some reason or another you're impersonating a Konoha shinobi, because I've never seen you before in my life. Third, judging by your appearance, and that little stunt you just pulled back there with my student, you are undoubtedly an Uchiha, which also strikes me as strange, because, for lack of a better term, you don't seem to have that proverbial stick up your ass. Have I missed anything? Nope. Naruto had to forcibly sink teeth into his lower lip to keep himself laughing at the last. I think you've just about covered everything and anything. Not quite. Sarutobi fixed him with a steely gaze. There's still the matter of who you are and what you want. Now, because you've chosen to be courteous to me, I shall extend the same courteously to you. I will ask you one final time. Who are you? Naruto dithered a moment longer, wondering just how much he ought to reveal. He'd already altered events by saving his mother, who was to say what would happen if he revealed he was from the future. Slowly the Jonin opened his eyes, letting the gathered teardrops run down the side of his face towards his ears. Just what the hell was he going to do? Even if they did believe his story, there was no way in hell they'd accept his change in appearance. At the least, they'd throw him in a mental hospital. At worst, they'd condemn him to death. The Shinigami's explanation rang through his mind once more. This is what you are going to say. He felt his eyes begin to burn again. He knew what answer he had to give. You know the name Uchiha Madara. There was a silence. When the third next spoke, there was an audible edge to his words. Surely you're not claiming to be. Naruto snorted and waved the Sandaime concerns aside. There could be no taking his words back now. The only way out was forward. Of course, I'm not Madara. I'd have to be like 100 years old. Much to his own consternation, he steeled himself, drew a deep breath, and continued the lie. Continued to weave this fine, delicate tapestry of falsehood. I'm his descendant. What? Did I stutter? Naruto forced a tuft of arrogance into his voice. Easy enough when you knew someone like Sasuke, and watched the words work their magic. Uchiha Madara is my grandfather. I am of his blood. Must I demonstrate myself further? Sarutobi paled and promptly crossed himself. Twice. Naruto watched a myriad of emotions flicker across his face. A descendant of that man, standing here before them. Now that he looked, the man did bear a passing resemblance to the legendary Uchiha, but no. That couldn't be possible. Madara didn't have any descendants unless he fathered a child before being slain by Hashirama in the Valley of End. And if he had, if such a child had grown and produced yet another child. He slammed the lid shut on that train of thought before it could consume him. I'm afraid I'll need more proof than your word. See is believing, after all. Naruto sighed and released chakra into his coal-black eyes, awakening the bloodline bestowed upon him. Sarutobi stiffened as the Sharingan abruptly emerged, its triple tama swirling fiercely angrily in each eye. Naruto bit back a grimace of his own once he beheld his reflection in the Sandaime's slate-gray stare. Madara's eyes were still evolving. Rapidly. Would he unlock the Mangekyo at this rate, and lose his eyesight before he could accomplish his goal? He hoped not. Those eyes. His invisibly swallowed, as though he'd seen something in them Naruto had not. I see. Gathering himself up with an effort, he forced himself back to the table once more. Why have you come here then, after all this time? Surely you could have left Kushina at the gate. I mean, at Naruto's thunderous expression he was quick to amend himself. You must have had a life outside these walls. My father recently passed on. Another lie. But before he did, he told me that all Uchiha were welcome here, and as I find myself growing lonely, I decided to stay. Is it a problem? Not at all. Sarutobi seemed to welcome this change of topic with open arms. If you wish to come into the Hidden Leaf, that can be arranged. But onto other matters. Where did you get the headband? He asked. This? Naruto pretended to consider the Heshiate for a moment. It was passed down to me. A trophy of sorts. I'll have to have someone validate that. A small smile etched across his visage, like a crack scrawling across stone. But if you're telling the truth, I'd be more than willing to welcome you into our village. He rose out of his chair and pulled up a seat. You may wish to make yourself comfortable then, stranger. You may be here quite a while. My name is Naruto. At last he thought to himself, some truth. Naruto, then. Sarutobi confirmed. I'll have someone come by to collect you shortly. As you wish. Naruto replied slowly, choosing his words with the utmost of care. Send a Yamanaka to pick my brain. I have nothing to hide. Hours later. Some hours later, Naruto chewed on his bottom lip as he wandered through the streets of Konoha. It had been a long time since he had been able to walk through the village like this, especially since it had first been destroyed back when he was 16. They had done a very good job rebuilding it, but it just hadn't been the same. Especially once it was destroyed the second time. Another thing that had slightly unnerved him at first was seeing so many Uchiha. He hadn't gotten around to figuring out how he would prevent the massacre yet, but it would still be years before that would happen, at the very least. On the other hand, that made it of utmost importance that he try to convince the Hokage to get the Uchiha to merge with the village, more than they currently were, lest they risked alienating themselves even further in the future. And then there was the matter of Tobi and Uchiha Madara, not to mention, ouch. Naruto touched a hand to his head and fought to keep from cringing. His head was still throbbing, a side effect of having his memories so thoroughly inspected. As the Shinigami had said, that which was seen were not the memories of Uzumaki Naruto, but Uchiha Naruto. Who would have thought the god of death could do such thing? Not him. It still riled him to be seen as an Uchiha when at least on the inside he remained an Uzumaki. By Kami, this was going to take some getting used to. Humming as he walked along, he got the occasional glance from villagers, some of whom would give him a small nod of acknowledgement and maybe a smile before continuing on their business. Others, many of them Uchiha, scowled at him, likely due to their inherent suspicion of Uchiha mother. Now that he claimed to be the man's descendant, it was only natural that suspicion be abound. Yet another big difference: previously he was either completely ignored or treated like a celebrity, especially after Pain's attack. This right now was a happy, if not nice, medium. I guess I could get used to this. He rubbed at an itch on his arm, not used to having them sheathed in long sleeves like they currently were. The Hokage had gotten him a small apartment to use, and a few sets of standard jonin clothing, along with a few sleeveless vests and the standard jonin jacket. The outfit was similar to that which most Anba wore, but he currently didn't have a mask or arm guards. That lofty station was well beyond his reach at present. After all, he'd only just been allowed into the village after the Hokage revealed him to half the damn populace. And he was fairly certain his goals didn't include joining the infamous Black Ops anytime soon. As for now, he'd be more than happy with a warm meal of ramen. The scent of it caught his nose, causing his head to snap back around. He spun about, seeking its source. There, standing in all its early glory, Ichiraku ramen. One miso ramen, please. It was all he could do to keep the grin from his face as he rushed inside and took a seat. All his strength was focused on preventing his knees from knocking together as he awaited his long-favored treat. The chef took his order and ducked back behind the curtain, leaving the Uzumaki-turned-Uchiha to wait impatiently for his food. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Finally, just as he was about to check on him, a voice prickled at his ear. "Well, hello there, handsome." Naruto opened his eyes and turned in the direction where the voice had come from, only to come face to face with possibly the most gorgeous girl he'd ever seen. He found himself peering into the coal-black eyes of another Uchiha, a lithe beauty with long, lustrous black hair, and a body that, despite being clad in Konohagakure fatigues, would have made even Tsunade Ba-chan green with envy. She smiled warmly as she strode to meet him, claiming the seat opposite him on the bar without so much as an invitation. There was a cool, aloof air about her, as though she existed solely to strike fear into the heart of others. He could appreciate it in a woman, but there was something about this one that instantly put him on guard. Dangerous. Have we met? Naruto failed to bite back that inquiry before it could leave his lips. While he didn't know her, from her gaze, it was obvious the woman knew him. "No, we haven't," the Kunoichi replied. "But I'm sure Kushina's told you all about me. I'm Mikoto," she continued, pausing, peering at him. "I honestly have no idea who you are." Naruto shook his head. "Pity." She rolled her shoulders. "Father won't like that. But thanks for being polite, for whatever it's worth. That aside, I understand I have you to thank for saving my best friend earlier." Naruto almost barked out a laugh, before he realized the repercussions of his actions. Instead of Minato saving his mother this time around, he'd been the one to do it. His actions weren't helping his case any. He had to calm down, and think things through rationally from here on out. The slightest action could have untold repercussions in the future. As a matter of fact, "Mikoto," a male voice exclaimed, cutting him off. "There you are." The smile shattered on Mikoto's face like so much glass. Before Naruto could protest, she looped an arm in his and drew dangerously close to him, bosom pressing into his arm. While he himself was surely no stranger to intimacy, he still felt a flush rise in his cheeks as she did this to him. He was, after all, only human. And those breasts pressing against him. "Play along," she hissed in his ear, mere moments before a stern-looking man appeared via Shusen. Once again, Naruto felt that faint sense of deja vu. He'd seen this man somewhere before. But where? "What is the meaning of this, Mikoto?" the man demanded. "What are you doing?" "What does it look like I'm doing, Fugaku?" She smiled, scooting closer to Naruto. "I thought I'd introduce myself to our long-lost clansman." Naruto nearly dropped his chopsticks. He knew that name. In his youth before the massacre, he'd gotten into enough trouble to learn it well, having often found himself before the man's death to be brought to the clan's so-called justice for his pranks. Just as he knew this man would someday be the father of Sasuke and Itachi. His left hand twitched with the sudden desire to kill this man. After what Sasuke had done, he'd be doing a world of good by ending his father's life. "This fool." Fugaku scoffed, scowling at Naruto. "He's no kin of ours, regardless of what Lord Hokage says. Anyone with dark hair and black eyes can waltz in here and claim to be one of us. But what proof does he have, I wonder? For all we know, he could be an enemy spy." Snick. He blinked in surprise as a thin red line opened across his cheek, spilling crimson down his collar. Naruto retracted his hand back onto the counter, having been the one to throw the knife with deadly accuracy. His eyes narrowed upon Fugaku. His Sharingan must have activated somehow, because the man visibly flinched when he met his gaze. Care to run that by me again? He hissed. You don't frighten me, outsider. The Uchiha snapped back. A no class like you is nothing. No class? Is that so? Naruto quipped, detaching himself from Mikoto, swiveling to face the man. Then why does it look like you're about to piss your pants? He had the succinct satisfaction of hearing Mikoto's laughter. Why did that sound bring such perverse pleasure to him anyway, and his grin only grew as he beheld his adversary's reaction. Fugaku's face flared 5 different shades of red. You dare? Oh, I dare. The former blonde was rising from his stool now, raiment completely forgotten in the wake of his anger. What are you going to do about it, little man? Ah, the sweet irony of it all. As an adult, Naruto was a good head and shoulders taller than Fugaku, towering over him like a giant. To think he once feared this man in his youth. There was nothing he could do to hurt him now. He was invincible. Untouchable. And if this belligerent fool thought he stood a chance in hell, he'd probably try. And Training Ground 7. The words were little more than a snarl. This evening, with Mikoto-sama as my witness, I will prove just how worthless you are before the clan, worm. I'm shaking in my sandals. Naruto growled, knowing the man had just made a fatal mistake. Without another word, Fugaku rounded on his heel and vanished in a shushin. Kami, I am so sick of him. Mikoto groaned the moment he was out of earshot. All he does is prattle on and preen like a complete idiot. The clan this, the clan that. He's not even the heir, and he goes on about it more than I do, for God's sake. Sighing, she pressed her head to the counter, as though she could somehow bury her woes there. He's an ass, isn't he? Naruto muttered into his drink. Just like Sasuke, he added to himself. Mikoto shook her head at that, raven tresses swing from side to side. That's not it, I'm the representative of the whole clan. If the clan is in a bad position, I must protect it. I'm an only child, and my father isn't getting any younger, so the job of looking after the clan must be left to me. My father is the supervisor of that job, so that's probably why he pays so much attention to me. But with conversations between us alone today, when Otu-sen spoke with me, he spoke of you, and what you did for Kushina. You were bold. Reckless. Not a thing like Fugaku, not even in the slightest, and because of that I think he's a bit jealous of you, frankly. Me? Mikoto nodded. The long-lost descendant of Uchiha Madara who wouldn't be jealous of you. She nudged him playfully with her shoulder. So, are you going to accept his challenge? Naruto's frown flipped itself upside down. You bet your pretty little ass I am. Her onyx gaze pinioned him. You know it's a good thing you're cute. His grin was positively beatific. I try. That evening. Are you prepared, fool? Hi, I'm quite ready to kick your ass. Fugaku's expression turned murderous. You worm. Naruto stifled a yawn as his so-called rival spewed yet another vitriolic retort. This was getting old. When were they going to start? The sun was just beginning to settle in for the vining, casting their grounds in 7 shades of flame. An unbeaten breeze blew through his tattered black locks, stirring the dead leaves at his feet and wiping them up into a frenzy. He watched them blow away, fluttering across the horizon until even his newfound eyes could no longer track them. Reluctantly, he allowed his sight to track across the remainder of the clearing. Fugaku had been good on his word. There were at least several dozen clan members crowded into the training grounds, each eager to see him succeed, or fail. The latter wouldn't be happen. He didn't recognize any of them, but then again, he'd only ever really known Sasuke and Itachi. Mikoto, as heir to the clan, stood at the forefront with her father, a large grizzled old man who looked as though he'd seen more than his fair share of missions in his time. But it was the former who stepped forward, took her place between them. She looked positively regal in her kimono, the fabric a dark shade of dusk, almost as if she were in mourning. Her visage was anything but. She seemed almost pleased. Uchiha Naruto. When she spoke, her tone was solemn, bordering on reverence. Fugaku has challenged your claim as Uchiha. Do you accept this challenge? Naruto grinned. Hell yes. He was going to enjoy this. A slight smile lifted her lips. Very well. Nodding, she turned to face the latter. Uchiha Fugaku. Do you swear by the clan to fight with all your... Hi. He cut her off mid-sentence, already inhaling. Mikoto scowled and took a sharp step backwards, returning to her father's side. Then begin. Kaden. Fugaku snarled, expelling a great stream of flame. Dukaku no Jutsu. Naruto scoffed and made to move. Instead he balked as the stream of fire gushed toward him. Why couldn't he move? Why? Ah. Unbidden the memory was there, hand signs and all. Naruto reeled as a wealth of information flooded his mind. It was as if every jutsu Madara had ever seen, ever mastered, was now his own. And he knew just which one to use. Steeling himself, he drew in a deep breath, kneading the chakra in his stomach, giving it shape and form. If one wanted to extinguish a flame, they need only give rise to an even more powerful inferno, by which they might overwhelm and extinguish it. Fugaku must have sensed the sudden upswing of chakra, because his eyes bulged. That's... Kaden. Naruto spat, grinning from ear to ear. Goku Mikyaku. He exhaled mightily, expelling all the chakra he'd been stoking in his lungs. The great fireball found itself snuffed out, easily extinguished before the rising inferno as it roiled forward into Fugaku. The elder Uchiha had just enough time to realize his folly before the blaze overtook his position, swallowing him whole. No. His mind railed against this sudden turnabout, fought the realization, the knowledge that he had more than severely underestimated this newcomer, this descendant of Uchiha Madara. Pain. Fugaku's last sight was of the torrent of flame rushing towards him, his last smell that of charred flesh, his own flesh. Then the black of unconsciousness took him. Well, can't say I didn't see this coming. These were Naruto's next words, accidentally spoken aloud as the clan carted away the charred corpse that had once belonged to the great, now very late Uchiha Fugaku. And even if he was somehow wrong, if by some miracle the pile of smoking flesh wasn't a corpse, the man would likely never be a shinobi again. The Goku had done massive damage, not just to the clearing, but to the buffoon's body. The arrogant Uchiha had been left sporting massive third-degree burns. One of his hands had all but burned to ash in the massive explosion. Not that he felt sorry for him, mind you. Far from it. He was simply in awe of his own power. It was hard to believe that a single fire technique, even one of Madara's, had done such a good job at wiping that smug smile of that prick's face. If Kurama was still with him, he was certain the old fox would be laughing all 9 of his tails off. Even now, fire crews were still working to put out the blaze with water. Those few who had remained of the Uchiha gazed upon him with varying emotions of respect, awe, and in some cases even fear. As much as he might loathe to admit it, he just established a respected place for himself in the clan. And quite possibly changed the future. As he tried to contain his trepidation at continuously changing the future, Mikoto sidled up to him, appearing visibly pleased with the end result. "Well done," she said, indicating the charred terrain within a glance. "I wasn't aware you knew such an excellent technique, as expected of Madara's descendant." Her finger trailed across his cheek before he could think to stop it, tracing thin lines across his cheek where his whiskers once dwelt and pulling his face towards her own. "You know." When next she spoke, her lips brushed his outer ear, words warmer than her breath. "I do believe I'm starting to fall for you more and more, Naruto-kun." She took him by the arm and began to lead him away from the others, deeper into the grounds. "Odd. So how did it feel, obliterating him a single move?" she asked at length. "Don't lie, I saw your face back there. You enjoyed it." The former Uzumaki opened his mouth to say a reply, and promptly snapped it shut as she stepped away, awaiting his reply. "Sure, alright, Naruto, just roll with it. It was easy." He feigned a small smile and typical Uchiha arrogance. After all those years spent around Sasuke, it wasn't that hard. The fool wasn't even worthy of facing me. Truth be told, it was the great destroyer of flame was the only fire jutsu that held any sort of real significance to him. Madara had used it to nearly wipe out the Shinobi Alliance multiple times during the war. It was only fitting that he use it for the use it toward the greater good than to end their duels swiftly. He felt a brief pang of sorrow, suddenly realizing he just might have ended Itachi's existence before it had ever begun. But that was what this was about now, wasn't it? He was here to change this. Some of those changes might not be pleasant. And some of them might. The voice didn't belong to Kurama. He realized it was his own subconscious, a whisper of desire as he glanced at the woman beside him, refusing to be denied. There was certainly something alluring about Uchiha Mikoto. She was bold, beautiful, and if her lips on his ear and her words were any suggestion, she was obviously attracted to him. He was no stranger to the female form, but what to do? Decisions. The old man had informed him that he wouldn't be able to accept missions for at least a week while he was instated as a citizen of Konoha, and it wasn't as though he'd be able to change anything just by sitting on his hands until such a time, so. Which reminds me, Naruto-kun. I have a favor to ask. You want to fight me? Naruto cocked his head aside as Mikoto finished her explanation, restraining a pained grimace, as his raven locks threatened to blot out his vision once again. Call me alive, but he wasn't used to have this much hair. He'd have to cut it soon, perhaps into his old hairstyle. Maintaining it in its present form was absolutely out the question. Eerie resemblance to Uchiha Madara aside, he didn't necessarily enjoy being reminded of those old memories. The images of the madman cutting his friends and family down were still too fresh to endure. Mikoto nodded, mistaking his silence for affirmation. Just a simple spar. No ninjutsu or genjutsu. Only our Sharingan. Perhaps in kunai. I wish to see how your skill compares to mine. Once more, the time-traveling shinobi had to pause to consider the ramifications of his actions. Something about the way she said spar set off alarm bells in his head. Surely she couldn't be serious. After seeing what he'd done to Fugaku, she wanted to face him herself. You'll have to forgive me lack of enthusiasm. Granted. She replied, raising her arms and settling into a stance. You don't strike me as the type to hurt someone without cause. I like that. So, why don't we sweeten the deal? That caught Naruto flat-footed. Once again, and for the first time, since meeting with Hiruzen here in the past, he was truly at a loss for words. I beg your pardon. Mikoto's smile sent shivers down his spine. Say, if I win you'll spend the remainder of the day with me. You'll spend the night in my quarters and do whatever I ask until sunrise. Oi, oi, oh I. And if I win? The heiress's grin seemed to falter for an instant, as though she hadn't considered the possibility of her defeat. Then I'll be yours to do with as you please for the evening. Just like that. Naruto's deadpan was barely concealed. He didn't believe her for an instant, but something inside him stirred at a challenge. If I didn't know better, I'd say you're trying to get me in bed. Figured that out on your own, did you? Look, we barely even know each other. What's to know? Mikoto countered, folding both arms before her not insubstantial bosom. I find you attractive. Don't you feel the same? It has nothing to do with whether you're related to Madara or not. I could care less about that. However, what I do care about is your strength. You proved your power against Fugaku back there. You're obviously more than a match for most of our clan. I dare say you'd even best my father, and he's the clan head. As his heir, I wish to see your true capabilities firsthand for myself. You do understand that, I trust. Yes, Naruto chose his words carefully, but I still fail to see why you want me so badly. In the face of his silence, she smiled. It seems forward, I know, but I have always known what I've wanted in life, ever since I was a little girl. Someone strong. A man who doesn't piss or preen over tradition. Someone willing to stand up for himself and what he believes in. She turned aside then, her eyes downcast. Until you came along, I was beginning to lose hope. I'd never thought I would find someone like that. Unfortunately for you, and here she did raise her gaze, eyes bright and determined. You've come into my life at the worst possible time, and done exactly what I had hoped to do, turn my entire clan on his head. I expect you to take responsibility for what you've done. And then, just as swiftly as her Sharingan had shown itself, so too did it fade, those charcoal orbs unexpectedly softening. Do you not find me attractive? She asked, tucking an arm around her waist whilst she spoke. As a fellow Uchiha. Oh dear God, she's adorable. Naruto felt a trickle of blood trickle down his nose, and promptly slapped himself. Just who the hell was he staring at here? Itachi's mom, Itachi's mom, Itachi's mom. I have to calm down before I go and do something stupid. And yet, his mind was screaming at him, telling him that this was the woman responsible for giving birth to Itachi and Sasuke. By all rights they might not exist now after what he'd done to Fugaku, but a small part of him cried foul at the thought of eradicating Itachi from existence. He tried to shut down all thoughts of mutual attraction from his mind, but to no avail. They clung like a stain to his brain, resisting all attempts to be scrubbed off and clean. And as such, he wasn't quite hearing the next words that emerged from his mouth. Well, you're certainly not unattractive, Jay. These Uchiha really spoke their minds, didn't they? She wasn't anything like Itachi or Sasuke. Nothing at all. He didn't remember either of them being like, well, this. He was swiftly losing himself, Naruto was, and their spar had yet to even begin. Well, when you put it that way. Begin. She dove at him, her body a lithe blur, ebony tresses streaming out behind her as she threw the first punch. His new eyes saw it coming a mile away. What they didn't see was her hand emerging from the pouch at her back. The blow had been a feint. Naruto's head snapped to the right, his mouth snapping shut with a harsh click as something screamed towards his face at breakneck speed. He felt something catch between his teeth, and only then did he realize he'd caught a kunai between his teeth. Mikoto gave him no time to try and process his small victory, however, her hand scything towards his neck in a devastating arc that, if successful, would surely leave an awful bruise if it connected. He'd learned since a young age to underestimate the strength of an Uchiha, certainly not one in her prime. But the his head arched backward, taking the kunai between his teeth and shooting it back at her with the sheer force of his tongue alone. A thin slice opened upon the older Uchiha's cheek, earning him the briefest of surprised snarls. His hand snared her wrist in a vicious vice, biting down with enough force to shatter bone. This same technique had broken Tsunade's wrist hours before. Mikoto didn't even flinch. Naruto saw it then, the chakra circling in her veins, strengthening her body, granting her resilience, momentarily surpassing his own strength. Not bad. She conceded. But, he challenged. But I can do better. Mikoto scissored her legs beneath him, depriving both of their balance. The Uzumaki turned Uchiha had a heartbeat, to realize just how much he was beginning to enjoy their little spar before that old instinct of his kicked in, sending his new body whirling into action. Sharingan eyes flared, he saw her heel come sweeping towards him an instant before Mikoto began the motion. In the blink of an eye, he launched himself upright, planting his knee into her stomach. He braced himself then, readying for the counterattack. That never came. Mikoto crumpled like a sack of potatoes, her body flopping like a wet noodle to the ground. Oh crap. He'd underestimated his strength. Just what kind of awful power dwelt in this new body of his, to fell someone with a single blow. Stooping to a knee, he began to check for a pulse, silently fearing the worst. He hadn't killed her, had he? A harsh cough from Mikoto swiftly disabused him of such a notion. She was still breathing, though stunned by the blow to her stomach all the same. Sorry, Naruto murmured. Guess I don't know my own strength. Impressive. She gasped up at him. Your strength exceeds everything I thought it would be. Truly. As promised, Nope. What? I said no. Naruto felt he might be making the biggest blunder of his life, but still, he shook his head. Don't force yourself for the sake of your clan. I detest that. More than anything, he hated it when people were lying to themselves. He wanted no part of this if the heiress didn't truly want him. And for a moment, he thought he'd been right. Mikoto stared up at him for a long moment, her dark eyes disbelieving, her expression torn somewhere between anger and amused ire, as though she found this whole speech of his incredibly funny. A joke, even. Then she straightened, albeit with some effort, refusing all attempts at assistance. Whoever said I was forcing anything, fool? Her hands closed around his visage, and drew him forward, their faces now centimeters apart. I wasn't lying when I said I wanted you. Ha. Mikoto looked like she was going to say something else, but she didn't. Instead she smiled, leaned up, and kissed him. Naruto shivered, a small tremor of desire coursing up his spine. But desire wasn't enough to hold him to Mikoto, no matter how much lust he might feel in that regard. It took a great deal of effort to break away, but he did just that, gasping slightly. We can't do this. He argued as she tugged him out of the sunlight, and into the trees, but the words were without rancor. Oh, I think we can. She reached up, twirling her finger through his hair, stroking his scalp through the sea of ebony tresses. In fact, we're going to. Right here. Right now. There was just something about the way she said those words that stripped away his self-control. Gazing down at her eyes half-lidded, her fingers exploring every inch of him told Naruto all he needed to know. He'd been wrong. Mikoto wasn't being forced into anything, she was doing this. There was absolutely nothing flitting across his frame. No, you don't understand. He was cut off as her mouth struck his, her lips connecting with his ferociously, her tongue probing against his. That did it. The last bastion of his self-control crumbled. Preview. Don't talk like that. Naruto shook his head. You're a hero of the village, after all. Kushina flushed. A hero? What makes you say that? Because you're holding back the Kyuubi, preventing him from escaping. Naruto's deadpan was barely concealed. Isn't that obvious? Why should anyone mistreat you for your sacrifice? There was a silence. You're really trying to make me fall for you, aren't you? What? It seems you're having fun, partner. Naruto opened, his eyes bristled. He knew that voice. It was his own, speaking to him for the first time since the Falls of Truth. You? It's me. He experienced a sudden flash of his darker half with its dark red eyes and bleak smile. Relax, partner. Yami Naruto soothed, spreading his hands in a calming gesture. I'm not here to cause trouble. If anything, I'm here to congratulate you. Betting 2 women at once. Hot damn. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.
It's not a game, it's a